Uh, I tell people the story. Most people don't think it's true, but this is a true story. Father had a band. Father's band was kind of like the modern jazz quartet. I was about 6, 7 months old. I sat up at a rehearsal at the house for about 2 or 3 hours, and my mother said a very wet diaper, and didn't complain, didn't cry. All I did was stare at the drummer, right? And after this one particular rehearsal, apparently I had done this before. After this one particular rehearsal, the drummer came over, handed me his drumsticks. All right. Okay. The next morning, my mother was woke to the sound of drums in the house, and of course, her first impression was, what in the hell is my father's drummer doing in my house at 5 o'clock in the morning, playing drums, right? She comes downstairs. Somehow I had managed to get myself up on the drum stool, and I was sitting there going ting, tick, to ting, tick, to ting, tick, to ting. And my mother, at first, she said she thought she was in a dream, and then it dawned on her that this was actually happening. And she said she screamed and woke up the rest of the house and said, "He plays drums! He plays drums!" So, for as long as I can remember anyone calling me Poogie, I've been able to play drums. I don't know how. I don't know why. I made my quote unquote television debut at the age of 2 years, 6 months, playing with my pop's band. But, I know, most people think, most kids, it is just kind of, blah, 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 blah. Okay, now granted, my drum soloing back then was very, very, Cecil Taylor didn't have anything on me. It was very, very abstract. But when I played with the band, I could swing, and I could keep time, you know, and yeah. So I had a whole, basically, man. I was born in 1961. I have been going to the gig since 1963, you know, and influences. Too many to name because I've had so many over the course of my life, so many great drummers, people you've heard of, people you haven't heard of, who mentored me and were very kind to me. My uncle, his name is George Childress, was a union man, right, in Pittsburgh where I live. So he got to go around and check all the union cards and musicians. So I would go out with him on a Saturday in the afternoon, and they had all over Pittsburgh had organ trios and great jazz bands and stuff. But there was one place called the Crawford Grill. So at the Crawford Grill, that was like the club. So Coltrane played there, Art Blakey was from Pittsburgh, or Max Roach, all these kind of people would be at this club. So just as an example, I went and I met Max Roach, and I played a little bit for him, and he had like one of the first snare drum stands. It had, we know now as whatever you call, I don't know what's called, wing or whatever, and a nut on the bottom. But they, almost like, wow. And he had this really cool drum seat, and I was like, wow, right? And I was like, man, Max, I'd never, that's really cool, man. I mean, it's like, I was freaked out. I must have been about, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there. And at the end of his stay at the club, my uncle comes home. He says, "Hey, man, guess what?" I said, "What?" "Look what Max gave you." And he gave me the snare drum stand. He gave me the seat. I used that snare drum stand until it fell apart. I must have been 20 something before, but I just was like, man, Max Roach gave me this. I'm going to use it forever. You know what I mean? So, but there's so many guys, that, I watch and listen to, and Harvey Mason, huge influence on me. Lenny White, huge influence on me. Harvey Mason, who's a good friend of mine now, and I tell him this story, and he goes, "Poochie, you're crazy." There was a time when, in my early teens, if I went to a store to buy a record, if I didn't see Harvey Mason's name on the back of the record, I wouldn't buy it. That's how much I was into Harvey Mason. You know what I mean? It was like, if Harvey's on it, I don't care who's playing the rest of the music. I'm buying it. You know? So, but so many different drummers, man. You know? So many different cats. You know? You try not for there to be a difference. At least I try um, to do what I would do, at least on my records anyway. What I would do on the gig, I try to do that in the studio, and it all depends on who you're working for, or I mean, what the project is. I mean, sometimes I work with a producer with Vanessa L. Williams. And so she had a song out called "Save the Best for Last." I didn't play on that record, but I played on the follow-up record, and they were trying to write another pop ditty, like to follow up this song. And so the producer was very very well, this tom has to be tuned to this note, and this has to be this, and you have to play this tom first, and you have to play that. So my point is, I guess it's all about um, applying your skills to what it is that the people want. You know what I mean? I think that if you go into the studio with the studio kind of like, well, I have to do this and it has to be like this and the blah 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 blah. It's you shouldn't go into the studio with preconceived notions. You should be able to be flexible to do whatever, or malleable to do whatever the music or the producers you're working with need. Like I did Angelique Kidjo's record. We were kind of playing, kind of studio-ish, right? And she was like, "So, are you guys are gonna play, or are you not gonna fucking play? What are you gonna do here? We're trying to, And it was like, oh, in her mind, she's at the gig. So then, I was like, and I said, oh, great, I can just play whatever. She was like, yeah, you know. But but you have to be able to feel where the session's going, where the people are going. You know, I think when you play uh, live, that you should always, at least me anyway, I'm always trying to reach for 110%. That way, if I bottom out somewhere between 99, 98, and 100, then it's really a good gig. You know, and I think the most important thing about playing live is to remember that you have to be a team player. You know what I mean? If somebody's, follow basketball, if somebody's open and they're closer to the basket than you are, you pass because they have a better chance of making a shot. I think a lot of musicians go to a live gig, and instead of playing musically, a lot of times they're like auditioning for someone in their mind, and the bass player's not listening to the drummer, drummer's not listening to the bass player, keyboard player's not listening to the singer, and they're just playing. Hey, watch this! I learned to have this at home, and look, like I can watch this. I'm gonna do a triple somersault now, and blah 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 blah, and blah blah. But yeah, but are you making any music here? People came to hear music, and music is a team sport. So when you play live, you have to listen. You have to listen. You have to listen to what's going on around you. You have to know if you're working with a singer, all right, how does the singer feel today? Did they come to the gig with a lot of energy, or is their energy down? Do you have to give them more support or less? You know what I mean? You have to be able to gauge things. You have to be able to vibe with people. I think the musicians that we all love, the main reason why we love them so much is because they know how to work with other people. If you sound really good playing by yourself, yeah, so who cares? It's about what can do with others. You know what I mean? And it's not really about the level. Some people get wrapped up on the level of musicianship and the technical ability and this, that, and the other. I've heard a lot of rock bands. You could tell the cats only know three chords. Drummer only knows one beat, but they're working together, so it feels good. It sounds good. You know, Blues guys only know how to play in one key, but they're playing with each other. They're bringing the feeling across of the music. That's what matters. If you're playing a rhythm, and if you look out in the audience, and if you don't see anyone, any body movement at all, a foot patting, a hand moving, something happening, that means your beat's not coming across. You're not speaking to the people. You have to learn to speak to the people with your rhythm. They have to feel what it is you're doing. Visually be entertaining and all that crap. But if people can't feel your beat, hello, you're a drummer. You know what I mean? The majority of the people who get in the studio, back in the day, we used to call them red lighters. So they can play real good, but then as soon as you start recording, they forget like they know how to play their instrument. So, and because of these things, so you have these really, really wonderful microphones, and you finally get to hear yourself clearly and what you're actually doing. You know what I mean? And so, for a lot of people, this completely freaks them out. So, I would say to first learn to get comfortable with the fact that whatever you sound like, you're about to find out what you sound like. And don't let that freak you out. Okay, the click track. Okay, the click track. It's real simple. Okay? If you can't hear it, that means you're with it. Okay? Don't tell the engineer to keep turning the click track up. Okay? I've heard people have a cowbell playing in their headphones that you can hear 150 kilometers away in another city. The click is so loud. Okay, it's going to ruin your hearing. Okay, and it's going to bleed into all the microphones. And it's going to fuck up the sound. It's going to fuck up the session. So the rule: if you're playing with a click track, if you don't hear it, that's because you're with it. Okay, it's easy. Oh, and the other rule, because this thing's a thing, it's okay. Now think, a click track. Okay, it's just time. That's all it is. It's just time. It doesn't give a fuck about you. Okay, it had no feeling. Don't let that sway you. Even though there's a click track, you can still play a little on top of the beat, or you can still play a little behind the beat. Okay. You can't allow the click track to turn you into a robot. Okay, you don't want to turn into Robbie the robot because there's a click track playing. And that's basically it. And don't freak out when you hear yourself. This is what you sound like. And it's okay that you don't sound like what you thought you sounded like. It's okay that you don't, well, I worked on this role and I thought it was just like Dennis Chambers, or I thought it was just like so-and-so. And no, it's you. But it's okay. It's cool. You know what I mean? Enjoy what it is you do. The most important thing any musician can have is an identity. And your sound, whatever it is, that's you. Just get with it and enjoy it. There you go. Okay, well, I'll put it to you this way. When the drum machine, I can remember the first time I saw a Lindrum, actually, 1980 something. I can't remember the exact date, but I went, oh, well, that's cool. You know, like a lot of guys, live guys, shied away from anything and everything that was electronic when it first started to become the thing. There was a period during the 80s, and this is a true story, that I didn't own a drum machine. Only thing I owned was an SP 1200. And I was deeply into making samples and making programming and the whole thing. Um, I think that it's important if you're going to be a working musician that you have to deal with the reality of the world you're living in. If the people make a left turn and you say, no, I don't want to make that left turn, well, they're going to look at you and say, well, see you later, and they're going to go where they're going to go. So you can either roll or you're going to get left behind, you know. And if you're going to have a longevity in your career, you have to be able to be malleable. You have to be willing to change. The thing that really amazes me too, especially about quote unquote jazz musicians, um, you have so many of those guys are so stringent, like it's like this has to be this and this has to be this and this has to be that. But then when you look at the creators of music, like Charlie Parker and blah 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 blah, these people were constantly about change. These people were constantly about crossing lines. You know what I mean? So this past year I just turned 51. You know what I mean? And I don't want to get old fogey ears, man. I want to always be open to whatever the new thing is, and see what I can do with it. And if there's anything that my past experience can bring to it. Young guys are doing it one way, but I might say, yeah, but I could put my old spin on it this way, or take your young guy thing and add something, or use your thing, you know what I mean? Add your thing to my thing, like I've seen these, I watched this guy at the NAMM show, and he called himself a speed bass pedal player, right? And I had never seen this before. And I'm like, wow, your feet go really fast, And I'm saying to myself, well, I don't know if I can develop that or if I should develop it, but I'm not going to tell this cat that he shouldn't or that this isn't a cool thing. You know what I mean? Who knows? What it could turn into 10, 20 years from now. You know what I mean? So drum machines, using samples, or using whatever it takes to get from point A to point B. If you're making a record and if you're being honest to whatever the project is, you have to do that, or you end up with a half-ass record. You know what I mean? Plain and simple, like I wouldn't try, I probably could fake it good, but if I was somebody calling me to produce a heavy metal record, which I'm sure probably never will, I probably could fake a heavy metal drum beat, but it would make more sense for me if I was the producer of the date to go out and hire a guy who does that. You know what I mean? So I think in order to make a great record, you have to be able to be honest about what it is you're doing, and whatever tools it's necessary to get to that point. I've done records, that I produced for people, or even on some of my own records. If I played 4 bars that I thought were really good and worked every time in a chorus, dude, I'll copy and paste like that because it felt good and it did what it needed to do. I didn't need to do anything else, Where in other times, like I'm working on a project at home with this young keyboard player right now named Brett Williams. And we're just kind of going in the studio and we're just kind of playing whatever. You know what I mean? It's probably going to be very, very little editing, So it all depends on how you're trying to get from point A to point B. But if you're going to be a good producer, you got to be willing to do the things that are necessary to get to point A to point B. You have to know what you can do, and you have to know what you can't do, and you have to be honest with yourself. You know what I mean? If you know you can't sing, well, you have no business singing the chorus of the song. You know what I mean? If you know you really can't play guitar, well, you have no business trying to play power chords. You have to be honest. And if you usually, because the people are going to be able to hear it, they're going to be able to tell instantaneously, Yeah. So I think, so honesty is the best policy, and whatever you need to get from point A to point B, as a producer, that's what you do.